And I don't think I realised until I joined Logistics UK. I had a vague understanding of how much logistics actually underpins everything that we do. It's medicines, it's food, it's the clothes we wear, it's everything in between. And I have to say that I've just had my year anniversary with Logistics UK, and I have found it to be a fascinating industry to be part of, and one that I feel very privileged to be part of too.
Welcome to Chain Reaction, the podcast for the supply chain and logistics industry. If you enjoy this conversation, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome again to the Chain Reaction podcast. I'm Michael, CEO of Flox Logistics Marketplace. This podcast is brought to you by Flox as a way to engage with logistics and supply chain professionals and to explore forces that are shaping logistics industry in the UK in particular. Before we get underway, please subscribe to the channel. It will really help us reach a wider audience and continue hosting these conversations for people that find it highly relevant to what they do. Today, my guest is Maddi Solloway-Price, who leads Logistics UK Road Freight team as a head of Road Freight and English Regions policy. In this episode, we will be looking at how government regulations and policy developments are evolving, particularly around mental health and a human side of the industry and operations, and how the priorities and trade-offs are being balanced across the sector. So, Maddi, thank you for joining us.
Michael, thank you for having me.
As with every episode lately, I like to start kind of asking the conversation. I start asking guests about how they found their way into logistics. I mean, for some it's by accident, but I saw your LinkedIn profile, and you have a law degree, and then you worked in House of Commons. So it's actually quite an interesting kind of career, and now you are in the logistics sector. So how's that happened?
So my background is in policy. So I've always enjoyed being part of creating policy that has actual meaningful and impactful kind of results. And so Logistics UK, we're one of the biggest, in fact, the biggest business group for logistics. So that really appealed to me, being part of an organisation that covers not just road, but all the different roads, and can actually work with our members across the country and further afield, that can make a real tangible difference to the lives and policy of day to day. And I don't think I realised until I joined Logistics UK. I had a vague understanding of how much logistics actually underpins everything that we do. It's medicines, it's food, it's the clothes we wear, it's everything in between. And I have to say that I've just had my year anniversary with Logistics UK, and I have found it to be a fascinating industry to be part of, and one that I feel very privileged to be part of too.
No, it is a fascinating subject, and yeah, absolutely. I also fell into this kind of accidentally about sort of 20 plus years ago, and then it's like peeling an onion. There's always another layer, another layer, another layer, and that kind of complexity is absolutely fascinating. But sort of in my consulting career, pretty much kind of a previous career, and where we are now from a platform and a Flox point of view, we are paying a lot of attention to the technical side of things, as in looking at prices, looking at efficiencies, looking at kind of various algorithmic improvements and so forth. But one thing that we are forgetting, and that's a fascinating subject that we're going to explore today, is the human side of things. And by human side of things, I don't mean HR. I don't mean kind of employee relations. I mean the well-being of colleagues that are, I don't know, behind the wheel in the truck, or being stressed out in the firefighting for kind of load planning and all of that. So can you talk a little bit about that, and kind of, because that is a fascinating and a hugely important area.
It
Kind of
is.
not just what the Logistics UK does in this space, but some of the elements that actually kind of, can you frame that conversation? What do we mean by mental health?
So for me, I'm super passionate about this area, not least because very early on when I started with Logistics UK, I read a statistic from 2017 that said that HGV drivers are 20% more likely than the national average to take their own lives. And that's really, really terrifying when you think about that. So that's male HGV drivers. And you have to think about what those reasons are. And obviously we can think that it's long hours, it's perhaps lack of access to driving facilities, or not enough of them, perhaps it's road safety, freight crime, whatever it is, there is clearly something that's raising that issue. And I think what's important is that people are talking more about mental health. And traditionally, with it being a male-dominated industry, perhaps it hasn't been at the forefront of people's minds. But you're absolutely right to say that it might be a little bit forgotten by organisations and businesses. But I would put to them that actually mental health and provision for your employees is actually about making sure that you are a productive industry and a productive business, because happy, healthy employees are more productive employees. They're people that stay with you as well. They, retention is improved. And, from a human level, we want people to be their happiest and healthiest selves. So Logistics UK, we started looking at ways that we could work to improve those things. And obviously, you're probably aware of this, but driver facility provision across the UK is brilliant in some places, and there are some amazing providers doing fantastic things, but there's just not enough parking spaces with access to healthy food, with actual basic provision like toilets and showers. And then on the top of that, you have the risk of freight crime, because there's not a specific crime code for freight crime, so it's seen as a low risk, high reward crime for organised gangs. So add that all together, it can make the picture quite difficult. So we have been working with government to try and introduce a crime code for freight crime to tackle that. So there's a wonderful member of Parliament called Rachel Taylor MP, who has put forward a freight crime bill within Parliament. And we've been working with organisations like NAVSIS to try and tackle that issue. And then also calling on government to have better provision of driver facilities across the UK. So there are lots of moving parts to mental health within the industry, but what is really clear is that it is integral to also productivity, not just a nice to have. It's something that all businesses within and operators within logistics should be thinking about.
It's very interesting, and definitely a very important area. So you mentioned the crime bill, and so obviously safety and security of both the people and the goods are absolutely paramount. And you mentioned the government is looking into having a kind of a dedicated crime bills. With regards to facilities and other aspects of kind of well-being of colleagues, what are the current thinking? What are the current the trends and thinking in governments in terms of whether it's regulation or legislation or whatever that may be, essentially that either mandates or encourages employers to be not just mindful but actually act and do something, and actually provided, and which is actually another topic that I want to or constraint that I want to touch on here, is freight and logistics businesses very often are very low margin. So they squeezed quite a bit, and it's hard. It's quite hard for them to dedicate generous budgets to the well-being programs in-house. So how does that work, and how those trade-offs could be balanced?
So on the small margin aspect, you're absolutely right. Our whole industry functions on small margins, which is why we've created Thrive, which is an online system which is basically signposting mental health support for our members, but also for the whole of the logistics industry. So we've partnered with people like Calm, which is a campaign against living miserably, Night Shift, which look at night workers, and physiotherapists as well as NHS guidance, and also an organisation called Shift, who have created a driver CPC out of Rugby University, which is all around driver health, making healthy choices around food and nutrition and activity. So we've tried to create a practical platform for people to be able to access real support for free. So although there are some member portions to the website, it is available to anyone. I'd encourage any of your listeners to access it at logistics.uk/thrive. It's there, it's available to use, and really think it's a brilliant resource. Just on numbers, so it's only recently launched, and 12,000 people have visited the site already, and we've had over 300,000 reach, which probably just illustrates how important this issue is, that people are engaging on such a high level. In terms of what businesses can do and what organisations can do, I think it's a really difficult conversation to have, because mental health is so personal and it's also, dependent on individuals. But what businesses really should be doing, and what we would like to be, is for them to be creating a culture and a space where if people are struggling with their mental health or physical health, they're able to raise it with managers and access support that they need. I think it's about reducing the stigma and making sure that people are aware that they can share if they're struggling. And I think it's a really important first step into making sure that people are having these conversations.
Right. Well, I mean, we talked about earlier. It is quite a male-dominated kind of the sector, and we're not very good at sharing. I can tell you that. And me being Gen X as well, which is actually double the problem here.
Double whammy.
But the interesting, I mean, it's great that you mentioned that the Thrive. So it's an online platform that is absolutely free for everyone to access, and people without even potentially disclosing or needing to highlight it to the to the managers, and the business just simply can access it for themselves to look for. So what can they get there? Is that advice, or is that kind of a bit of a like an assessment type thing, just to get a to get a bit of a sense of where people are, or it's interactive, or how interactive is it?
Yeah. So it's predominantly signposting with some elements of interaction. But the idea is that, exactly as you say, you can go on there. You don't have to tell anyone that you're doing so. There's access to support around healthy eating, stretching, physical activity, NHS guidance on mental health, the Calm Charities guidance on mental health. And the whole idea is to make sure that people feel just maybe a little less alone, and also have that place where they can go and access. As you say, men traditionally are less likely to be talking about their mental health, but we are seeing that change. There is a bit of a cultural shift. And when it comes to regulation, I think that people are starting to see health and mental health well-being as a significant element to safety. So traffic commissioners are talking a lot more around the human factor, and making sure that, DVSA are talking about driver health in the same sentence as vehicle health. And there is a change with that. So when we're talking to our operators, we're having conversations with transport managers to make sure that they're aware of these things, because as regulatory components are starting to look more on mental health, not as a nice to have, but as an integral part of road safety regulation, they need to be aware of that and perhaps be part of the cultural shift within their own organisations.
Especially for the younger audience, I mean, that's kind of prompted me to think, for the younger audience that are much more, not audience, I mean our audience, for the younger colleagues in logistics who are more open to use our social media platforms. Are you also promoting these kind of things, or like podcasts, or I don't know, TikTok channel, or some other modes or ways of reaching out the audience, not just with what is the art of the possible, but also with some maybe advice, some podcasts, and some talks that for the people help others to kind of figure out things about themselves?
Yes, I have a brilliant colleague called Scott who actually has been leading on the Thrive campaign, and he does all of our social media. So he's got it on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and all those other places that I am not cool enough to know about. But he sorts all of that for us. And from what I understand from him, the interaction's been really, really positive, which is fantastic that people are engaging, but also just show that this is a significant issue. I would just like to pick up on that, though, because I think it's really important that whilst having this conversation, I'm not making our industry all about doom and gloom, because it's a fantastic industry to be part of. And I think that we can have a nuanced conversation saying there are things that need to improve, whilst also recognising that it is a brilliant career for people to have. So when we're talking about the need for better driver facility provision and freight crime support, it's also in the context of there are already brilliant driver facilities available. There just aren't enough of them, and that actually our industry is a brilliant one to be part of.
You are listening to Chain Reaction. This podcast is brought to you by Phlox, the leading marketplace for the supply chain and logistics industry. Visit phlox.is to find out how you find the perfect supplier or make your services available to prospective buyers. Thanks for tuning in. Now back to the show.
It's not doom and gloom exactly. There's lots of great stuff in the industry, and it is an industry that basically make the world kind of move and work in the physical terms, in the physical sense of the word. But you did mention the facilities, and I think what strikes me as well is there's to a mental well-being. There's quite a lot of factors external, such as I want to go to Gents, and then there's nothing for the next 50 miles. That's like, where do I go? Especially I'm on a truck, so I can't just simply stop on the side of the road. So going back to the policy side of things, because a good facilities would require investments. And investments could be, as you mentioned, that there could be private, and some of them could be state kind of sponsored. So what are the thinking? What is the thinking? What are the policies? What are the kind of movements in that particular space, just to make the to make the roadside facilities more accessible, better equipped, more attractive, more present?
So it's a great question. So the government have released match funding for existing driving facilities. That's through National Highways and also DOT. And where they have released that match funding, we've seen really brilliant improvements to existing driving facilities. However, we've asked for that match funding to also be extended to new facilities because there just isn't enough provision on the road. So we understand that the cost implications of setting up these new facilities is significant. But alongside that, there's also the planning difficulty. So under the National Planning Policy Framework, we have the word logistics in now, which is a brilliant step forward. However, when discussing with local government what logistics actually is, what we found is there's still an element of, for lack of a better phrase, like freight blindness, where they don't necessarily understand what logistics is, how it can impact the local area. So when they're talking about creating place and all these nice to haves with coffee shops and pedestrianised areas, we are having conversations with them, for example, saying, but how do you get the coffee delivered? How do people that live there get their shopping delivered? You need to have logistics as part of these conversations. And alongside that, when thinking about logistics, sometimes there is a default to think about warehousing as opposed to the facilities that then support that warehousing, such as driver facilities. So as an organisation, Logistics UK are working really hard to try and change that perception, trying to work with local planners to understand what it is that the logistics industry actually needs, because as we've said, nothing moves without logistics. Every single day, we hear, well, we need to sort out public transport, but not every single day does everyone use public transport. Every single day, people benefit from logistics, and it should be supported and included within planning policy in the same way.
Interesting. So what you mentioned actually prompted me. I've heard multiple times about sort of not just the governmental policies, but somebody was talking about and set or mandating. I don't know what's the right kind of term in this space, is to establish a position for like a minister for logistics, because it is a well, they say banking is a lifeblood, but we are the muscles. The logistics are the kind of the muscles of the UK PLC, and we don't have a minister who leads all the kind of and centralizes and coordinates all of the kind of the governmental thinking and management of that absolutely essential part of our daily lives. So, do you know any kind of evolution in that space?
Yeah, so I do believe that there is a minister now looking specifically at freight, and certainly within DFT, there are people, civil servants, that their sole job is looking at freight and logistics. And we work with them every single day to make sure that the requests of our members are heard at the highest possible level. I think your point, though, is that traditionally logistics and freight has been seen as a nice to have as a part instead of a foundational sector. And I think that there is a better understanding now that actually without logistics, what is it? We contribute 170 million to the economy. That's significant. It underpins, like I say, everything. It's medicines, it's food, it's clothes that we wear. Look around your room, everything's got there because of logistics. And I think there is a cultural change with people starting to understand, especially within government, and certainly I would like to think from the work that we're doing, raising the profile of logistics on behalf of our members, that there is a greater understanding, not just of the things that people perceive as nice to have, but actually the regulatory requirements such as road safety and some of the more technical requirements that we're asking for around weights and dimensions of vehicles, for example.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the other elements I would say is a lot of the thinking about logistics, kind of from the policy point of view, is gravitated towards freight movements, like road freight predominantly, but the movements as well. And I think, or at least I've heard as well, that the warehousing side of things is being slightly kind of underlooked as well. So I hope that the way that the policies are going is actually they're going to look at logistics holistically. I mean, I've seen, I believe you guys have renamed, because it used to be Freight Transport Association, now it's Logistics UK. So it's a slightly wider kind of, not just a remit, as the wider scope that covers all of this.
Yeah, I think our name Logistics UK literally covers exactly what we do, which is all modes of logistics and all the people that work within it too, whether that's warehousing, drivers, people on ships, airplanes, etc., etc. All freight is what we cover.
One other point that we've touched upon, and I left it maybe for last to explore, is again getting back to well-beings, to human well-being and the colleague well-being, and particularly with drivers. So there is a constant theme over the past decade or so, even more so, the driver shortages, and so what we are seeing is the elder generation is retiring, or people, especially after COVID, some of them are not even returning back to their jobs, and the youngsters are not necessarily attracted, given all of the sort of the facilities and some other challenges. So, what is happening in that in that space, both from kind of the governmental thinking and as well as from the Logistics UK point of view?
So I think that driver retention, but also attraction, is definitely significantly on the agenda. And we're not at the stage where we were during COVID, for example, but we're definitely acutely aware that, as you say, the driving population is an ageing population, and what we need to do as an industry is try and attract more people to our industry. There is a brilliant organisation called Generation Logistics that my colleague Bethany Windsor is part of, and Logistics UK support, and they have done fantastic work trying to engage people to the logistics industry. I think they're in year 5 now, or year 4. But like I say, they do fantastic work. But we have to also be realistic about the things that we do need to improve if we would like to attract people to our industry. And one of those things is making sure, like, I can't imagine what it would be like at the end of the day not having access to a toilet, not having access to a shower, not having access to food, and having to park in a lay-by. We need to make sure that there is better provision across the whole of the road network so that everybody gets to use those brilliant facilities that do exist. Like I say, there's just not enough of them. And then on top of that, in terms of retention and attraction, thinking about the future, and maybe this is a conversation for another day for us to have, but around automated vehicles and the direction of travel around innovation, there's certainly a longer conversation to have there. But I do understand the complexities, but road freight isn't going anywhere right now, and we need to make sure that our industry is resilient. And so we're trying to improve what we have to make it so that people would love to come and work within logistics, which I'm sure you agree with me is a fantastic place to be.
Yeah. Well, things are not going to get moving without people being there, and whatever people are talking about robotics and automation, it's kind of it's here, but it's not there yet. But it's a fascinating but quite a heavy topic. I'm glad that you mentioned that. We can hopefully we can have another episode where we talk about that, either together or separately. We talk about electrification as well, and infrastructure. But
That would be
that's a
lovely.
huge one, and we are almost out of time. But we've touched on
Yeah.
a super important, super critical kind of aspects of a daily life of logistics businesses. But one thing that I also like asking all my guests. So we have talked about a number of challenges, highly critical ones, and but if you imagine the world of the Harry Potter, and then you have a magic wand, and if you can remove one challenge, one problem, one obstacle, simply waving and removing it overnight, what would that be?
Oh gosh, what a question. Okay, I think it would be for respect for our industry and for drivers and for people to give our industry the respect that it deserves and our drivers the respect that they deserve. Literally nothing moves without logistics. And I think that when more people understand that the work that we're doing, trying to raise that profile, people understand just how integral drivers and the industry is to literally everything. And I know from talking to drivers that sometimes they aren't respected in the way that they deserve to be. So if I had a magic wand, it would be to make sure that our industry gets the respect that it deserves.
No, fair point. Fair point. So, Maddi, thank you very much for sharing your
Thank you.
perspective and insights on a fascinating subject. And it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast.
Likewise, Michael. Lovely to meet you.
Yeah, thank you. And to everyone who stayed with us, and thank you for listening and watching, and hope you found the discussion as useful. And we look forward to welcoming you again in the future for the next episode. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Chain Reaction. We hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you have a story or insights to share from your sector, we'd love to hear from you. Simply reach out to us through the links in the description. See you next time.